Hello there, my name's Daniel Melville Jones, and this is a recording of a presentation I originally gave back in March of 2023 at the Conference on Christianity and Literature, Western Regional, in Azusa Pacific University, California. It's a presentation called Oh My People, Spiritual Leadership in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, and before I give it, if you hear a purr or a meow, it's my cat Babette, who's on my lap. Okay, let's go. Although Spike Lee's 1989 masterpiece Do the Right Thing accumulates in the killing of an unarmed black man and the resulting race riot, Lee is just as interested in letting viewers spend time with the characters who occupy the Brooklyn neighborhood. In this presentation, I seek to use Cornel West's qualifications for spiritual leadership to examine the central characters of the movie. The characters DeMayer and Mother Sister are aging reminders of civil rights icons who are at their best when they are brought together by the needs of their community. While often overlooked by others, Smiley brings Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X's messages into the neighborhood. Mr. Senior Love Daddy, the community's DJ, and Radio Raheem, the young man who is killed by the police, both embody West's concept of musical kenosis, a resurrectionary leadership which has an abiding effect on its community. Lee's film features this colorful kaleidoscope of leaders who together embody the tension between love and hate. According to West, the Los Angeles riots of 1992, 3 years after Lee's film was released, were symptoms of deeper issues ingrained in America itself. He describes these issues as America's spiritual impoverishment, which comes from the collapse of the spiritual communities that in the past helped Americans face despair, disease, and death, and that transmit through the generations dignity and decency, excellence, and elegance. Since Lee's film is likewise a diagnosis of America's sickness, it's worth asking whether the neighborhood it depicts is also spiritually impoverished. As it happens, there are only a few passing references to religion in the film. The neighborhood church, which for black marginalized communities has historically been a place of leadership and refuge, is only glimpsed once in the film's background. The main character rejects both Islam and Jehovah's Witnesses in conversation, and a portrait of Pope John Paul II hangs in the pizzeria. You can see it there in between those two characters. The only other religious element appears in the closing shot of the film when a well-dressed older couple can be seen on the left-hand side, presumably making their way to a Sunday service. This lack of religion might lead us to assume that spiritual leadership is absent in this fictional neighborhood. Nevertheless, Lee does populate his neighborhood with many candidates for spiritual leadership, especially if we use West's qualification that leaders are those who are grounded in the past while aware of the present. He writes, "The major challenge is to meet the need to generate new leadership. We need leaders, neither saints nor sparkling television personalities, who can situate themselves within a larger historical narrative of this country and our world, who can grasp the complex dynamics of our peoplehood and imagine a future grounded in the best of our past, yet who are attuned to the frightening obstacles that now perplex us." Lee seems to share this standard, for in his movie, leaders are those who know when to choose between the seemingly contradictory forces of love and hate. Leaders are those who are aware of the rich heritage offered by King and Malcolm and use it to respond appropriately to the issues of the present. In searching for the spiritual leadership of the Bedside community, De Meyer and Mother Sister initially seemed to be the most likely candidates. After all, they were played by black theater veterans Ossie Davis and Ruby Lee, whom a New York Times critic describes as, quote, stalwarts of the civil rights movement, end quote. De Meyer seems to represent the selfless, other-centered philosophy of King. He extravagantly purchases a whole bouquet of roses in order to woo Mother Sister, and later puts himself in danger in order to save young Elliot from a speeding car. During the fraught confrontation in front of the pizzeria, De Meyer is quick to stand between Sal's family and the crowd. Listen, 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 he interjects. Good people, please! Let's all go home. Somebody's going to get hurt. Later, when the pizzeria is lit on fire, he ushers the three white men away from the anger of the crowd. On the other hand, Mother Sister aligns more with Malcolm's tendency towards violence. Instead of ushering her enemies to safety, she cries, burn it down, when the pizzeria is lit on fire, knowing that its destruction is the right reaction to the community's experience of injustice. Mother Sister also spends much of the movie expressing her cynicism towards De Meyer and his acts of kindness towards her, which is another parallel between these two characters and Malcolm and Martin. Yet, despite their presence in the film, there is a sense that De Meyer and Mother Sister are faded examples of a former era whose ways are unsuited to the present. Scholar James McKelly describes De Meyer as destitute and powerless. Indeed, the man is at times a pitiful figure, willing to do anything for $1, including accepting the menial labor rejected by the rest of the pizzeria staff. With the exception of Ella, on the left-hand side there, the younger generation tends to scoff at his stories of leadership. Even his selfless intervention at the pizzeria does not have the effect it might have had during King's era, for one of the young black men immediately responds to his plea that no one gets hurt by stating, "Yeah, you boy." As for Mother Sister, her cynical quest for justice leaves her, in the words of McKelly, quote, anguished in the street, wailing, "No, no, no," at not only the horror of Radio Raheem's death, but the ultimately self-destructive terror which she herself helped to inflame, end quote. As we saw with the Flowers, De Meyer spends much of the time of the film, trying to reconcile with Mother Sister. With his repeated selflessness, does not win her attention on its own. While his repeated selflessness does win her attention, on its own, it's not enough to unify them. When De Meyer wonders, maybe I should be a hero more often, Mother Sister retorts with, maybe you shouldn't. Don't get happy. This changes nothing. It's only after they both fully express their love and their hate during that fateful evening that they are brought together. When Mother Sister is inconsolable in her agony, it is De Meyer who comes and embraces her in his arms, instinctually offering what can be the only solace in the face of such despair: tangible, embodied love. The next morning, De Meyer finds himself in Mother Sister's bed, the two of them brought together at last. When they both lean out of her window to gaze upon the aftermath of the street, there is a sense that they are handing the community over to the next generation. No wonder New York Times critic Mahala Dargis identifies their presence in the film as, quote, a critique of, or lament about, the promises and disappointments of an earlier activist era. Smiley is a younger character who spends much of the film trying to remind his community of King and Malcolm's example. While one critic refers to him as the Dostoevskian village idiot, I see Smiley as the conscience of the community, ignored until he reacts with genuine emotion and real action. Lee has him enter the film as if he were a street preacher, centered beneath the facade of a grand church, and calling out to his community, "Good morning, my name is Smiley." Smiley holds up a faded photograph of King and Malcolm, naming each of them while using his bright red Sharpie to revitalize the image into vibrant street art. No, now they are dead, he moans. But we still have to fight against apartheid, emphasizing the last syllable so that his sentence sounds like, we still have to fight against apartheid. Throughout the rest of the movie, Smiley makes it his mission to remind his neighbors of this message, like a preacher going out into his community after his sermon. An especially striking example comes during Sal and Buggin' Out's initial confrontation. During that whole scene, Smiley can be seen in the background, just outside the window on the right-hand side, trying to draw attention to his photo, as if reminding the characters that there is an alternative way to their confrontation. Smiley also holds up a photo when Mookie is trying to encourage Pino to kick Vito's ass. When Mookie finally yells, "Smiley, get out of here!" Smiley retreats, moaning sorrowfully. Mookie, preoccupied by encouraging brotherly hatred, has rejected the pesky voice of his community's conscience. Smiley's constant presence during the confrontation in the pizzeria and its aftermath suggests that he approves what takes place that night, knowing that it is now time for action rather than mere words. During the confrontation between Sal and Radio Raheem, he is an accusing presence in the background, thrusting his Sharpie at Sal like a knife. There he is in the middle there with that Sharpie. After Radio Raheem's murder, Lee's camera lingers on Smiley, who emits a gut-wrenching wail as he stands distraught in the empty, deserted street. Smiley then becomes a man of action. He lights the match, which burns down the pizzeria, his face contorted in agony as he does so, and, after the pizzeria is extinguished, enters the smoldering wreck to triumphantly pin one of his pictures on the ruined Hall of Fame. It's only then, with the actions of Martin and Malcolm unified in his life, that his face breaks into the smile that gives him his name. While Lee does not include any formal spiritual leadership, such as pastors or reverends, he does populate his neighborhood with musical leadership. In Race Matters, Wes connects the leadership of the black freedom struggle to what he calls the moral and spiritual fortitude of the black musical tradition. Wes goes on to define what exactly gives this music its spiritual power. The distinctive benchmark of black music is soulful kenosis, the courageous and compassionate styles of genuine self-emptying that gives all one is and has to empower, enable, and ennoble others. In Lee's film, Mr. Senior Love Daddy, you have to say his full name every time, uses his voice to remind his community of this kenosis, while Radio Raheem embodies that kenosis by walking and ultimately dying on the streets. Like Smiley, Mr. Senior Love Daddy serves his community as an unconventional preacher, the voice that everyone, including we, the filmgoers, hear from the day's beginning to its end. Lee opens the narrative of the film with a close-up of Samuel L. Jackson, who plays the DJ, lips, commanding everybody to wake up. The camera then slowly pans from his lips out into the street, emphasizing the connection between Mr. Senior Love Daddy's voice and the community that he serves. The best example of Mr. Senior Love Daddy's moral leadership comes after the montage of racial hate, which his voice interrupts with a piercing, "Hold up! Yo! Time out! Time out! Y'all take a chill. Y'all need to cool that shit out. And that's the double truth, Ruth." Mr. Senior Love Daddy also comforts his congregation the morning after the riot when he declares, my people, what can I say? Say what I can. I saw it, but I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it what I saw. Are we gonna live together? Together, are we gonna live? When the movie ends with the dawn of a new day, Mr. Senior Love Daddy's voice continues to exhort his people, urging Mookie to return to his family. It's the Mook Man. I see you walking down the block. Go on home to your kid. Telling everyone to vote, your Love Daddy says, register to vote. The election is coming up. And using the last words of the movie to dedicate a song to Radio Raheem. We love you, brother. In short, Mr. Senior Love Daddy does many of the tasks typically associated with a black minister. The only catch is that while members of the community enter his studio, Mr. Senior Love Daddy never leaves its glass walls. This is comically underscored when Mookie pauses outside the window while delivering Mr. Senior Love Daddy's hero Parmesan sandwich, and the hungry DJ can only gesture to his stomach through the window, there it is behind the word love, in a mute attempt to get Mookie's attention. Later, when the fire department aims its hoses at the protesters, the water hits Mr. Senior Love Daddy's windows. The DJ can only tear his shirt off and yell, yo, 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 well, come on, in what must remain a gesture of solidarity rather than involved action. He never hits the street with the other participants of the neighborhood. Mr. Senior Love Daddy's sheltered position is in contrast to Radio Raheem, who walks and ultimately dies on the streets. More than any other character, Radio Raheem fully embodies the movie's central idea of balancing love and hate, and not just because he wears those two words in shiny gold letters on his knuckles. Despite actor Bill Nunn's imposing physical presence and the genuine authority he carries, Radio Raheem's first words are, peace, y'all. When Mookie stops him on the street to admire his brass knuckles, the camera spins so that Radio Raheem faces the viewer directly. In this scene, his voice starts off soft, but his powerful physique crackles with tension as he delivers a sermon with what one critic calls the, quote, zeal of an evangelist, end quote. In this speech, hate has real power, but it is love which ultimately triumphs. When the camera pans back to let Mookie back into its view, the young man is visibly unnerved, but Radio Raheem's voice lowers as he stares into Mookie's eyes. If I love you, I love you. But if I hate you, before concluding with the words, I love you, brother. After that speech, it is clear that Radio Raheem is the most loyal friend and the most feared enemy. Or as Mookie says in response to that sermon, love and hate. There it is. By wholly embodying these two emotions, Radio Raheem is fully human, despite having that humanity challenged by Sal and the police who murder him. When he's first introduced, one of the characters says, that boy is living very large, even walks in stereo. Commenting on that line, critic Vincent Cunningham writes, quote, what a perfect metaphor for a person at his best, or at least his most impressive, irreducible, unrepeatable, attacking from all angles, fully alive. In all of his fullness, Radio Raheem is inseparable from his music, as his very name suggests. Moreover, his music, with its repeated refrain of fight the power, is a constant exhortation that his community be aware of and resist the powers of hate which so frequently assault them. So, when Saul insults Radio Raheem's music, fuck your music, Radio Raheem interprets it as a serious insult and responds with, this is music, my music. After Saul brutally destroys the radio, it's as if a part of Raheem has just been murdered, which Saul himself communicates when he states, "I just killed your fucking radio." Yet although Saul's treatment of the young man leads to his death, Radio Raheem proves West's kenosis theory by the way he becomes a rallying cry for his community's call for justice. His name is chanted as they respond to Saul's actions by burning down his restaurant. Radio Raheem's death and his community's response is therefore a concrete example of the love which gives West hope despite the spiritual darkness of contemporary America. West concludes his updated 2017 introduction to Race Matters with these words: "All great love, like John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, is resurrectionary. All great love transforms death into new life, turns your world upside down, shatters callousness and indifference, frees you to treat people more decently and humanely, and bids you to choose a life of struggle with a smile and style, and greet the warms after our time in the world with a warm welcome of I lived, I loved, I laughed, and I went down swinging like Muhammad Ali and Ella Fitzgerald." Radio Raheem's death did turn his bed stew community upside down, shattering their callousness and indifference. Indeed, Lee represents the resurrectionary quality of Radio Raheem's life by having his camera linger on his boombox, destroyed and in flames, but continuing to play Fight the Power, while Smiley tacks his embellished photo of King and Malcolm on the wall. Although Radio Raheem, Martin, and Malcolm are all dead, there is a sense that their actions and ethics remain alive and burning within this community. Thank you for listening.